Hello, welcome to Sunday Run Day, the podcast. First thing I'd like to do is thank everyone who tuned into episode 1. I was very overwhelmed with the amount of comments and the amount of views that I've had over episode 1. It was really nice to finally put my podcast out there and finally release it, and just to get everyone that watched it on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple. Thank you so much. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for sharing, liking, and just let me know how the first episode went. So episode 2 is here. Where do we continue with episode 2? I would like to start with where I finished episode 1 a little bit. I mentioned at the end of episode 1 that just behind me, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see I have a framed picture of what I say is my motto when it comes to running, that no run is a bad run, just some runs are better than others. And re-listening back to episode 1 of the podcast, I thought to myself, I can put my mantra and my motto when it comes to running into the podcast as well, and maybe say that no episode is a bad episode, it's just some episodes are better than others. And it's not that I thought episode 1 was a bad episode, but I definitely thought to myself that I can make some improvements along the way, a few things I'd like to adjust, a few things I'd like to change up as I go along with the journey on my podcast. And I think when I talk about the running journey, I think there's also a journey when it comes to the podcast. I'm going to evolve, I'm going to change, I'm going to bring out new things and talk about other stuff. So I listened to the first episode and thought, well, let's make episode number 2 even better. And I can guarantee that episode number 2 will be better than episode 1, because in episode 2 I'm going to share the story of my wife and her running journey. So Clara's story is absolutely amazing. I'm so lucky to be able to be a part of that story and her journey, and just amazed by how far she's come along over the years. So to go back to the start of her journey, I guess, will be the question I asked her of why you first got into running. Now, back in the UK, she'd done a few little runs with some friends. She didn't go much more than a 5k distance, and just little events there that were happening around in London. So she enjoyed doing that, but she didn't really get into running so much until she moved to Australia. And she mentioned to me the reason why she really got into running was to run with me. She wanted to spend more time with me. And when she told me that, I was a bit taken back and thought, that's amazing to have someone that wants to spend more time with you and to actually get involved in the sport that you love the most, to actually jump on board and run with me on a regular basis. So I think when I first got into running, Clara probably thought I was a little bit crazy waking up on a Sunday morning very early just to go out for a run. She always thought Sundays was for resting. But not anymore. In this household, Sundays is run day, so we tend to always go for a run on a Sunday. And then Clara started to get involved with a few runs. But it wasn't until 2017 that she decided to take on a challenge herself. Just as I took on my challenge of running a marathon, Clara took on a challenge of running 10 kilometers, and she wanted to run 10 kilometers in under 1 hour. We have an event here every year in Melbourne in the winter. It's called Run Melbourne. And that was the event that Clara decided to sign up for and wanted to run her first ever 10 kilometers under 1 hour. Now, Run Melbourne is an amazing run. For any of you listening that have been lucky enough to run in Run Melbourne, it's really cool. It is around the city. You get to see some monuments. It's a really well-organized event. And there's multiple distances within that event from 5K, 10K, there's a half marathon distance as well. But Clara's goal was to run the first 10k under 1 hour. She trained really well, but unfortunately she didn't quite make that goal. She missed out by a few minutes. I think it was around about 1 hour 5 minutes that she actually finished in her first ever 10k. But looking back, I think she will be very happy with how that actually went and how it kind of started her on her running journey, and how really that was the first time she ran that longer distance. And 10k is a long distance, We may now look at 10k as part of our training when we're running longer runs, but 10k is a massive distance. So to be able to complete a 10k was great. And then she learned a lot from that, taking that into more of her runs as she went on. So during the year, she obviously got better at running, enjoyed running a bit more. She wanted to go back to Run Melbourne, but instead of going back to run the 10k, she wanted to challenge herself. So she decided to go back to Run Melbourne and to run a half marathon, her first ever half marathon, and she had the goal of going under 2 hours. So she just missed out on the 10k under an hour, And now she's going back and she's challenging herself even more to be able to run that half marathon under 2 hours. And like I was mentioning last week, that's part of our journey and our stories, is that we're forever changing our goal. We're always looking at, what can we do? What is our next challenge? What's our next adventure when it comes to running? So Clara decided the half marathon was where it was at. And it was her first ever half marathon. She's done amazing. She smashed her first ever half marathon. Again, she just missed out on her goal. She didn't quite make it under 2 hours. I think it was around about 2 hours and 7 minutes. But for her to be able to finally complete her first ever half marathon, that was, really cool. It was something really nice to be a part of, for me to be able to run with her, but for her to actually finish that half marathon, she was really pleased with herself. Disappointed not to get her goal, but really pleased. Now, I can safely say since then, Clara has actually run a half marathon under 2 hours, and so much so that she's run a half marathon. The fastest one she's done now is 1 hour 34 minutes. So the progression she's made over the years is amazing, and something that I'm very proud of, just to be a part of, as I said, to be a part of seeing her evolve, but also running alongside of her with some of these events. But I wasn't there for when she done her 1 hour 34. She was doing that all by herself. I was there supporting on the sidelines, and just really pleased and really proud of her to get over and run that quick as well. So yeah, her progression has been really pretty amazing. She's knocked off the time. As I said, she missed out on her first half marathon by 7 minutes from her goal, and now she's running, nearly half an hour, over half an hour quicker on her quickest time. So Clara's now completed many half marathons, and she actually completed one very recently. Last weekend, she carried out the half marathon in Sydney, which was the Nike After Dark Tour half marathon. It was a really cool marathon, something that I was really happy to be a part of as a spectator, and Clara was super happy to be a part of as a runner. She ran phenomenal. And just to put a bit of context into this, we're obviously going to Boston, as I mentioned in the last episode, and as I release this episode, we will be in Boston. I'm just pre-recording this before I travel, so we'll actually be in Boston when I do release this episode for Clara to compete and run the Boston Marathon. Now, ideally, as her training has gone along, we've started to taper off as we get down to Boston, just so she can get that rest and be ready for the marathon. So running a half marathon a week before Boston Marathon is definitely not ideal. It's not something that we really planned. But unfortunately, this Nike After Dark Tour was just happening on that weekend here in Australia, and it was in Sydney. So I said to Clara she has to be a part of that. It's a unique event that Nike have put on only for women. So unfortunately, timing-wise, a week before the marathon, not ideal. But I said to Clara, just go there, enjoy it, be a part of a beautiful event, take your time, don't go out too hard, you're not competing against anyone, you're not trying to get your best ever time, just go out there and enjoy it, have fun. So Clara actually ran so well, she actually done 1 hour 37. So this is Clara just taking it easy, right? This is Clara going, I'm not going to go out too hard, I'm going to take it easy. And then she goes out and smashes a 1 hour 37. Amazing. I'm just amazed by it. But it was a beautiful event to be a part of, and really cool event. I think Nike done an amazing job in Sydney. The route was great. It was really good for me as a spectator. Many places I could spot Clara along the way and support her as she was going. They had a couple separate areas where there was a lot more of a crowd around to be able to view. So it was a really good event, something that I highly recommend for any women out there that wanted to run an event that's just put on just for women. So Nike actually do a few of these events around the world. So this one was just in Sydney in Australia, and there was a half marathon, but they also do, I believe there's one in LA, Seoul, Shanghai, Mexico City, and Mumbai. So some good events, and if you happen to be around that city or close to one of those cities, I'd highly recommend to sign up and have fun doing it, because it was a really put on well event. And I think with the stigma a little bit around women running at night, which can be very dangerous for them, and there is that fear factor that us as men, we don't really have. We probably a little bit, in tune to ourselves and think that we're okay when we go out for a run. But for women, it can be very dangerous to go out for running at night. So for Nike to put on an event of an after dark tour where there is a city is shut down for, at this time, it was 7,000 women running a half marathon. I thought it was amazing. There's a really good context to it, and it was a great event. Clara thoroughly enjoyed it, and she done amazing. So as I mentioned, Clara's done quite a few half marathons now, and we've done a half marathon That was last year was our first international half marathon. We went over to Petra in Jordan to compete in the half marathon in the desert, or the Petra Desert Marathon, but it was a half marathon distance that we chose to do. Just because we've never done an international event, we weren't too sure of how we'd feel. We decided to go over and do the half marathon. Now, they actually changed it a little bit on the day. It was a little bit more than a half marathon. I think it was 23 kilometers in the end, just the way they done the route. Because of Petra and the way it is, and if anyone has visited Petra in Jordan, beautiful site there, and, so much history, so much, Indiana Jones-like-esque with the treasury. Amazing place to go, highly recommend. And the half marathon that is done by Albatross Adventure Tours is amazing and super cool. Everything's organized for you. So we went over there to do the half marathon. Now, it was a great experience. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'll talk about my experience of the half marathon in another episode. But for Clara, her journey that she's come along, she actually went over to Petra and she won the half marathon. So again, super proud of her, amazing running. She ran super well in the desert and ended up winning the Petra half marathon last year. So pretty cool, great to be a part of, and great to actually see her progression. But it's not always been easy for Clara. It's not always been, getting her goal and winning an event in another country. She's actually had some struggles along the way with injuries, and it's been a real challenge with a lot of injuries. So she had a really bad injury towards the end of last year, and also the year before. And she really struggled with that injury. It took about 7 months to get over that, and a lot of work with the physio, a lot of work with strength work, but she come back a lot stronger. And so much so that she come back to run her first ever marathon. So that was part of her first injury. And then, unfortunately, after that, she had another injury. Again, taking a long time to get over. But she's overcome those injuries now, and she's a lot stronger. She's worked a lot more on strength, and just really enjoying the running. So now moving on to the marathon side of things with Clara. So she's competed in many half marathons, done a fantastic job, and she decided she wanted a challenge of the marathon. We had a lot of talk about it. It was towards the end of 22, early start of 23, that we had a lot more talk about the marathon. And Clara, really wanting to compete in a marathon and see how she would do. And I said to her, she's more than capable of doing that. She's really doing well at half marathon distance, and there's no reason why, without the right training, she can go and compete in a marathon, not a problem at all. So when we talked about it, she had a goal in mind of thinking she'd love to run in Sydney Marathon. So at the time, Sydney was in a candidacy period for being one of the world majors, and we decided that maybe it would be a great idea to be a part of the candidacy period and run before it was a major. So Clara said, I would love to run Sydney, and I think more so because the iconic finish to it. We get the opportunity to be able to run across the Harbour Bridge during the marathon, but the iconic finish of finishing right in front of the Opera House is something really amazing. And I think that's really what kind of drew Clara in a little bit more as her first marathon. We're lucky that we have a marathon here in Melbourne. Super good marathon. I love it. I love to compete every year in Melbourne Marathon. But I think the iconicness of Sydney really drew Clara in, and as her first marathon, that's the one she wanted to do. But she still was a little bit unsure and didn't quite sign up for it yet. We happened to go away for the weekend, and I said to her, so you're running the Sydney Marathon? And at that moment, she was still a little bit coy, a little bit cautious, of saying, I'm not sure if I want to. And then I said, no, you are running Sydney Marathon. I've signed us up. You're running it. We're about 16 weeks out before the marathon. You're already at a really good fitness level. We'll train for it. You're doing it. You're running a marathon. So like I mentioned last week, we sometimes have that friend that signs us up and says, well, I've signed you up now. You've got to run. That was me. I signed Clara up and I said, well, you're running your first ever marathon now. I won't dive too much into her training. She trained really well. The only thing I'll mention about her training is a bit of a funny story. There, during the training, unfortunately, Clara had to have her wisdom teeth taken out. Sometimes you can't plan this around, with the surgeons, and the time of actually getting the wisdom teeth removal procedure to take place was a little bit more difficult to plan it after the marathon. So unfortunately, it had to be planned during the marathon training. And when we actually got the date for the wisdom teeth removal, it happened to be the week just before our long run on the weekend. Clara asked me, how are we going to do this? I'm having my wisdom teeth taken out on a Thursday. will I be able to run on the Sunday? Nah, I'm sorry, we're not going to be able to do that. We cannot run on a Sunday after having the wisdom teeth taken out only a few days before. You've got to rest up, you've got to recover. So we were talking more about how we're going to do this long run. Do we do it during the week after? Do we do it before? We come up with a decision to go the Wednesday night before Clara had her wisdom teeth taken out. We're going to go for the long run. Pretty silly idea, but we thought, let's go for it. We had a long day at work. We only eaten lunch. We haven't eaten anything since lunchtime. And then there's us going out for a long run. We're very lucky where our long run actually is. We live close to the beach, and down in Melbourne, Beach Road is a pretty famous road, and it is a straight kind of road, I'd say, with the path on there. There is a bike path or a walk path that we can just run on, where we're quite lucky because there's not a lot of traffic lights, there's not a lot of stops on there. You can kind of continuous run. A few car parks to go across, but in general, it's a continuous run, and that's why we normally go for the long run. So we drove down there, parked the car up, and off we go. And I remember the run quite well. It was 32 kilometers we decided to do. And at that time, it was Clara's longest run. So bearing in mind, she's done half marathons, but she hadn't done anything over that. We were training, we were building up the pace, but 32K was her longest run. She'd done really well. She had a few struggles. It was a bit of an emotional run because, as I said, longest run she's ever done. We finished the run, we got home, had a bit of a late dinner. Next day, Clara had a wisdom teeth removal. Now, I'm not sure if that was a good thing because all the anesthetic she was under, she definitely didn't feel her legs. She probably felt some pain with her wisdom teeth removed, but in her legs, she felt pretty good. So I'm not saying I'd advise people to go out there and have their wisdom teeth taken out after a long run, but I'd say that it definitely helped with the recovery of the legs a little bit. But then here we go. We're off to Sydney, Clara's first ever marathon. Now, before we arrived in Sydney, we were heading up there on the plane on the Friday night, and we got some news. From Sydney Marathon, they released a little bit of news around the weather, and they mentioned that we're having a heat wave. Now, I know a few people listening to the podcast that's not in Australia, probably saying, heat wave in Australia? What are you talking about? It's always hot in Australia. Not the case. We do have seasons, and we do have a winter. So we were training during winter, June, July. That is our colder months. And I say colder, for us it feels cold. For some other people, maybe not. But living here in Australia, when it gets down to sort of 15, 16 degrees, that feels pretty cold. So we're training during winter. Then we get told there's going to be this heat wave. I said to Clara, don't worry, don't panic. It's going to be fine. We've trained really well for this. The marathon starts early. It's not going to be that hot that early. The heat wave's later on during the day. A little bit naive there because the heat wave was there early. Before we started, it was already 28 degrees. So we knew we were in a bit of trouble for the day. Now, when I mentioned in episode 1, I talked about some of my struggles during marathon running, and some different marathons have been worse than others. This was one of them that was worse than others. And I won't dive too much into my journey about this. We're still talking about Clara's. But I will mention about my struggle in this marathon. I was trying to help Clara on this marathon. The idea was that I was there to support her. It's her first ever marathon. I've been lucky enough to carry out a couple other marathons before that. I'm here to support you. I'm going to try and pace you so you can hit your goal. Now, she had a goal of wanting to do that marathon under 4 hours, which is super achievable. She's a great little runner. And yes, to double the distance of what she's done, I knew she'd be able to make it. But I wanted to be there to help her along the way. Now, if you're watching on YouTube and you watched episode 1 and in this episode, you see that I do wear a hat. I tend to wear a hat nearly all the time, but I never used to wear a hat when I was running. Now, the reason I probably wear a hat is because I do shave my head and I do like to wear my hat, but during running, I never used to wear a hat. Sydney was one of these times where I did not wear a hat. Now, having a heat wave and getting the sun hitting you for 42 kilometers, it was tough and challenging, and I didn't quite realize the challenge. So we're running along. Clara's doing really well. We're up to about 32 kilometers, and I could see a water station coming up. And I knew I was in some trouble, but I didn't want to tell Clara I was in trouble. I wanted to be there to support her, and I wanted to get her through. And I thought if I tell her I'm in trouble, she's not going to carry on with the run. She's going to stop and want to help me. But I said, no, off you go. You keep going. I'm going to catch up. I just need a bit of a time at this water station. I'm going to grab some water. I'll catch up with you. So as I get to the water station, unfortunately, I did feel really lightheaded. I had that little stumble. I had that dizziness. I had the stars in my mind. I was in a little bit of trouble, and I probably didn't realize just how much trouble I was in until I stopped at that moment. My body temperature was really increasing, And I was quite worried. And I will say this about Sydney Marathon in 2023. If anyone has actually completed in Sydney Marathon and were there in 2023, they'll probably see the same as I've seen so many paramedics around, probably more than I've seen at any marathon in different stops. So I started to get worried for myself. But I thought, don't worry, I'll catch up to Clara. I'm just going to try and cool down. I just cooled down with as much water as I could. There was some ice on the side as well. I was running with some ice in my hands and the back of my neck, thinking I'd be able to cool down. Unfortunately, I didn't quite manage to catch up to Clara. So as I was getting closer to the finish, it was probably about 3 kilometers to go. I realized I wasn't quite going to make it. And I kind of thought as well that I didn't want to catch up to Clara, because if I did catch up to Clara, she might not make her goal and she might be struggling. As it happened, she didn't struggle. She pushed through, and her determination and dedication got her through there, and she managed to finish her first ever marathon in 3 hours, 57 minutes. Super impressed and so happy for her. Unfortunately, I was a few minutes behind, and just on the 4-hour mark, I just kind of crossed the line there and was able to see Clara at the finish line. And obviously for me, I was very disappointed with myself not to be able to be there to support Clara. I wasn't bothered about my marathon time. It wasn't about me. It was about Clara's first marathon. But I was disappointed that I wasn't able to cross the finish line with her in the iconic Opera House and to be there to support her. And that's something that, I thought about a lot and thought that was the disappointment for me. But that disappointment kind of really went away straight away as soon as I seen Clara, because I was just so proud of her. She managed to go out there and complete her first marathon, do it in the goal that she wanted to do, and she didn't even need me to help her along the way. Safe to say, since Sydney, I now do wear a hat on every run. And when I say every run, I mean every run. It doesn't matter what the weather is. Today, for example, we've got the sun is shining, but I can guarantee if it's late at night, early morning, rain, wind, hail, sun, snow, I'll be wearing a hat. That is something that I learned from Sydney for sure. So that was Clara's first ever marathon. And as I say, towards the end of 23, she got injured, and she took quite a long time to get over that injury. But she wanted to go back and run another marathon. And that's what brings us into Sunshine Coast Marathon last year. Now, this is what I mentioned in episode 1, is that I really wanted to try and get a Boston Marathon qualifying time in Sunshine Coast. Clara, on the other hand, she just wanted to better her time from Sydney. She trained really well. She recovered from her injury really well. And she just wanted to get a better time. So we'll go to the Sunshine Coast. The Sunshine Coast course is actually quite good because it was a multi-lap course. So we were able to see each other a few times. I was always running on the right, keeping an eye out, making sure I could see Clara and giving her a wave if I could. And got lucky that I seen her a few occasions. And I thought, she's running really well. She's enjoying it. She looked good every time I seen her. But I didn't see her since about 30 kilometers. So as I said, I struggled when I finished, but Clara powered through. She absolutely smashed it. So much so that not only did she better her time in Sydney, she absolutely smashed that time. And she got a Boston Marathon qualifying time. I remember when I finished, I walked to the end and got some water. And I kind of come back to the start line. The finish line. And I brought 2 cups of water thinking, so as soon as Clara's finished, I'll give her 2 cups of water so she can have some water straight away. Because it's a little walk, maybe, 15, 20 meters or so. But I thought, I'm right there at the finish line, be able to give her the water. Now, I went to put the water down on the floor. And as soon as I put it on the floor, I kind of stood up to look at the finish line. And there she was. There was Clara finishing. I looked at the time. She finished the Sunshine Coast Marathon in 3 hours, 24 minutes. Not only smashed her marathon time before, but smashed the Boston marathon qualifying time and was able to now qualify for Boston. And as I talk now, we're now in Boston for Clara, and I'm super excited for her. So that's a little bit of Clara's journey and a little bit of her story around where she's come from running 5K events all the way now up to marathon events. And so much so, we are now here in Boston. And say, I'm not quite there yet, but as I release this, we will be there in Boston. I'm there to support Clara. I'm so excited for her to run her first ever major. As I mentioned, we run Sydney before it was a major. We're going to be very lucky to go back and run Sydney this year. Hopefully I'll get my redemption and me and Clara will cross that finish line together. I'll definitely discuss that in another episode as we get closer to Sydney. But for now, we're in Boston, looking forward to being part of this major. And also for me as a spectator, to be able to see just what a major's about, see the amount of people there. We haven't been a part of a major just yet, so I'm excited to be there. And I'm excited to share my side of the story as a spectator at a major, but also share Clara's side of the story as a runner. And that'll be in the next episode. I'll definitely discuss everything to do with Boston and our experience in Boston. And as I say, I'm super excited to go to Boston and support Clara. She's going to do amazing. She's come a long way in her journey, and so much so she's now running her first ever major marathon. If you haven't already, please jump on Instagram. Please follow me on @SundayRunday the podcast. Please check out the photo I've put on there of Clara. You would have seen I put on a photo earlier this week of her in her latest run. It was a cool photo and a cool event, and yeah, just super excited to be able to share her story. So again, thank you very much for tuning in to Sunday Run Day the podcast. And until next time, happy running.